Bruce Lee walked into a group that was already formed. People were standing in a loose circle near the center of the room, talking and laughing with each other. No one looked toward the door when it opened. No one made space for him. So he stopped near the edge of the room, close to the wall where a row of old metal folding chairs sat empty. He set his small canvas bag down quietly against the baseboard, the zipper making a soft rasp as he let it go. Then he began to train on his own. The room was one of those plain, no-frills training halls you find in older community centers or strip mall gyms. Scuffed wooden floor that creaked faintly underfoot, high ceiling with exposed beams, and a couple of slow-turning fans that barely moved the warm air. A few thin foam mats were rolled up and leaned against one corner. Along the far wall ran a long mirror, slightly dusty at the edges, reflecting the group back at themselves. Overhead lights buzzed a little, the kind of fluorescent tubes that had been on too long. There were about a dozen students already there, mostly young guys in their 20s, a couple maybe pushing 30. Some wore faded sweatpants and loose tank tops, others old band t-shirts with the sleeves cut off, the kind of clothes you grab without thinking because they're comfortable and already broken in. They had clearly been at it for a while. Their hair was damp at the temples, shirts stuck slightly to their backs, and the air around them carried that faint, familiar smell of clean sweat and rubber mats. You could tell just from watching how settled they were. Shoulders loose, weight shifted easy onto one hip or the other, hands gesturing casually as they spoke. Voices overlapped without anyone getting annoyed. Someone would finish a sentence, and another would jump in right away, adding a detail or exaggerating for the laugh. One guy in a grey hoodie was in the middle of telling a story about a bad sparring session from the week before. He was mimicking the other fighter's wild swing, arms flailing for effect, and the guys around him were nodding, grinning, throwing in their own bits. "Yeah, and then you ate that knee," or "Man, your face when you hit the mat." Laughter rolled through the circle again, easy and familiar. The group felt closed in the most natural way, not mean, just complete. Like they'd been meeting here every Tuesday and Thursday for months. And everyone already knew the inside jokes. Bruce Lee stood maybe 10 feet away from the nearest shoulder. He didn't clear his throat or wave to get attention. He didn't scan the faces, hoping someone would notice and call him over. He just started moving slow at first, arms hanging loose, feet sliding into small, precise patterns on the wood. His breathing stayed even, almost silent. Nothing flashy, nothing loud. No big kicks or fast punches to make noise. Just his own work, steady and private, like the rest of the room didn't exist for him right then. That was it. He was there, but separate. The circle kept turning without him. Inside the circle, the conversation kept rolling. The guy in the grey hoodie was still going, now acting out the moment he got caught with that knee to the ribs. He bent forward a little, hands up like he was guarding, then let out a short grunt for effect. The others laughed again, one of them reaching over to pat his back like they were reliving it together. Someone else jumped in with their own story about a worse hit they took last month. Voices rose and fell easy, the way they do when people feel comfortable cutting each other off because they know no one will mind. A couple of them had water bottles sitting on the floor near their feet. Every now and then someone would bend down, grab a quick drink, wipe their mouth with the back of their hand, and slide right back into the talk. Hands moved while they spoke small gestures, pointing at someone's shoulder to show where the punch landed, or tracing a quick arc in the air to mimic a hook. No one stood stiff. They shifted weight from foot to foot, leaned in when something funny came up, pulled back a little when they were listening. It was loose, familiar, the kind of group that doesn't need to try. Attention stayed right there, in the middle of them. Eyes met eyes. Smiles answered smiles. If someone on the edge of the circle said something, the others turned just enough to hear, then turned back. The energy didn't spill outward. It circled and stayed warm inside. It would have been simple for Bruce Lee to step closer. The gap between him and the nearest guy was only a few steps. He could have walked over while they were laughing, waited for a small pause, and said something casual, maybe about the story they were telling, or just a quiet "hey" to one of the faces he recognized. No one would have stopped him. No one was guarding the space. It was open in the way groups sometimes are when they're not thinking about who's missing. But he didn't move toward them. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look over for more than a second or two. He stayed where he was, back near the wall, feet planted on the cooler part of the floor, away from the mats. His movements stayed small and steady, shifting weight, rolling shoulders, letting arms swing loose before drawing them back in, breathing deep but quiet. The sound of his shoes on the wood was soft, almost nothing compared to the voices in the center. Minutes passed like that. The group didn't notice at first. They had no reason to. They were caught up in their own rhythm, stories, laughs, the easy back and forth that happens when people feel at home in a room. Every time the laughter settled, another comment kept it going. The circle turned a little as people adjusted positions, but it always closed again, faces toward faces. Then, while someone else was talking, one of them, a shorter guy with dark hair tucked under a faded cap, turned his head just slightly. Not a full turn, just enough to catch movement out of the corner of his eye. He looked over at Bruce Lee for a second or two, saw the quiet shifting, the calm repetition. Then he looked back to the group, nodded at whatever was being said. Nothing more. No comment. No point made. Just a quick glance and back. The conversation kept going, but that small look had happened. It was quiet. It was nothing anyone else noticed right away, but it was the first crack. A bit later, another pause came. The guy telling the latest story wrapped up his punchline, voice trailing off into a satisfied chuckle. The laughter around him rose, then settled slowly, like air leaking out of a balloon. In that small, quiet space between one joke ending and the next one starting, two heads turned at almost the same time. Not dramatic, just natural, the way people glance when something catches the edge of their attention. They looked over toward the wall where Bruce Lee was still moving. Same calm pace, same steady focus, arms drawing slow circles, feet sliding into place without hurry. No one said anything about it yet. The moment passed. Someone in the circle cleared their throat, picked up where the last story left off with a quick, "Wait, but remember when?" And the talking started again, but it felt slightly thinner now. The words didn't fill the room the same way. A couple of the laughs came shorter, like people were only half listening to themselves. He kept going, didn't speed up to match their energy, didn't slow down to disappear, didn't once look their way for approval or to see if they were watching, just kept training breath even, movements repeating in the same quiet rhythm. The soft tap of his shoes on the wood floor was the only sound he made, steady like a metronome set to its own tempo. More glances came after that. One guy, the taller one with the cut-off sleeves, stopped mid-sentence while explaining something about foot placement. His eyes drifted sideways, stayed on Bruce Lee a little longer this time. Not staring, just holding there. Then he finished his sentence, but it came out quieter, like part of his mind had stayed over by the wall. Another one noticed. A guy near the back of the circle tilted his head slightly, watching the way Bruce Lee's shoulders rolled, the way his weight shifted without any wasted motion. He didn't say a word, just watched for maybe 10 seconds before turning back. But the turn was slower this time. The circle started to loosen, not break apart, just soften at the edges. Shoulders that had been squared toward the center now angled a little outward. Feet that had been planted firm began to shift, small steps sideways or forward, almost without anyone deciding to do it. Someone stepped half a step to the side to get a clearer line of sight, opening a small gap where there hadn't been one before. The talking kept going, but the exchanges got shorter. Sentences trailed off sooner. Pauses stretched a second or two longer than they had at the start. The laughter still happened, but it didn't roll through the whole group the same way. One or two people would laugh, then glance over again, and the sound would fade quicker. The energy that used to bounce only between faces in the middle was starting to leak outward, pulled toward the quiet figure by the wall who wasn't asking for it. Still, no one walked over yet. No one called out his name or waved him in. They just kept doing what they were doing, talking, shifting, glancing, while the room slowly, quietly began to reorient itself around something new. A few minutes more passed, and the shift became clearer. 3 or 4 of them were facing outward now, no longer fully turned in toward the center. They weren't staring hard, just watching openly, the way people do when something interesting is happening and they don't want to miss it. Their conversations had thinned out to short comments, half-finished thoughts. One guy said something quick, got a nod or a short laugh, but the energy wasn't looping back the same way anymore. The shorter guy with the dark hair, the one who had glanced, first started mirroring a small movement. He stood a little apart from the others now, hands loose at his sides. Then, almost without deciding, he lifted one arm the same way Bruce Lee had just done, slow circle, elbow soft, wrist relaxed. He did it once, paused, then tried it again, feeling the motion in his own body. No one pointed it out. No one said, "Look at him copying." It just happened, quiet and private. Another one joined in without a word. The tall guy with the cut-off sleeves stepped half a step closer to the wall. He watched Bruce Lee's feet for a moment, the small slide, the weight transfer, and then tried it himself. Slow, careful, like he was testing how it felt. His shoes made the same soft scrape on the wood. He repeated it twice, then looked down at his own feet as if checking the placement. No announcements. No one clapped or called attention to what was starting. It spread the way things do in a room when people are paying attention without admitting it yet. The rest followed slowly. The circle wasn't really a circle anymore. It had stretched thin, pulled apart at the seams, and now the shape was drifting toward the edge of the room. People stepped closer, not rushing, not crowding, just closing the distance, one small movement at a time. One guy picked up his water bottle, took a sip, then walked a few feet nearer while still holding it, eyes on Bruce Lee. Another shifted his whole stance, turning his shoulders fully outward so he could see better. A third one simply moved sideways until he was standing beside where Bruce Lee was working, close enough now to feel the rhythm without interrupting it. Some stood right next to him, matching the pace, same slow arm rolls, same foot slides, breathing falling into something close to the same tempo. Others stayed a couple feet back, watching first, then lifting their own arms to copy the pattern. The room grew quieter overall. No more loud stories bouncing around, no overlapping laughs cutting through, just the soft collective sound now. Feet on wood, steady breathing, small adjustments of weight and balance. The fans overhead kept turning, slow and steady, but the air felt different, less scattered, more gathered. They weren't following orders. He hadn't asked them to come over. He hadn't even looked up to check if they were watching, but the space around him had become the new center, and the old one had faded away behind them. He didn't stop to acknowledge them. He didn't pause his movement to look around and see who had come closer. He didn't turn his body toward the group or raise his voice to explain what he was doing. No nod of thanks. No small smile to say, "I see you." He just continued exactly as he had from the beginning. Same slow rhythm, same even breathing, same quiet focus that had started when the room was still full of laughter and stories. The others kept gathering without being invited. Some stood right beside him now, close enough that their shadows touched on the wood floor. They mirrored the arm circles, the weight shifts, the small foot slides. First one, then another, then 3 at once. No one spoke about it. No one asked, "Is this right?" They just tried, felt the motion in their own bodies, adjusted a little, tried again. A few steps back, others watched longer before joining. One guy crossed his arms at first, observing the way Bruce Lee's shoulders stayed, relaxed even after minutes of the same pattern. Then he uncrossed them, lifted his own arms, and started copying slower at first, like he was borrowing the tempo. Another one beside him did the same with the feet, sliding instead of stepping, keeping the weight low and balanced. The sound in the room changed gradually. The scattered voices had almost disappeared. What was left was the soft, collective rhythm, breathing in time, shoes whispering on wood, the faint creak of the floor under shifting weight. Even the overhead fans seemed quieter, as if the air itself had settled. He finished in his own time. No big ending flourish, no dramatic stop, just the natural close of the pattern, the last slow circle of the arms, the final small shift of weight back to center, a single deep breath out. Then he stepped back one pace, wiped the thin layer of sweat from his forehead with the bottom of his shirt, and bent to pick up his bag. The zipper made the same soft rasp it had when he arrived. When he straightened, the others were no longer scattered. They had gathered nearer to where he had been standing, some still moving a little, repeating pieces of what they'd seen. Others just standing there, arms loose, breathing steady, as if waiting for the next quiet thing to happen. The old circle in the center of the room was empty now, mats untouched, water bottles forgotten on the floor. No one was laughing anymore. No one was finishing someone else's sentence or slapping a shoulder. The stories from earlier felt far away, like they belonged to a different hour. The room held a different quiet. Not tense, not awkward, just full. The kind of quiet that comes when people have stopped performing for each other and started paying attention to something simpler. He slung the bag over his shoulder, gave the space one last glance, not at the people, just at the room, and walked toward the door. No one called after him. No one asked him to stay or come back next time. But as the door closed behind him with a soft click, the group stayed where they were. A few kept moving, small patterns repeating. Others watched each other, then tried again. The center had shifted. The edges had become the middle. When he walked in, he stood outside the circle. When he left, the circle was no longer where it started.